Welcome to the Foul Play YouTube channel. This is the PowderPuff edition. We'd like to invite you to join us on Discord. Foul Play has a lot of, we have a big combination of people there, from professionals all the way up to just anybody that comes in here new, wanting to know anything. Please join us on Discord. Our links will be in the chat and in the description. And today we're going to take a quick look at the response deadline. It's come to our attention that people are trying to really nail this down as to what the dates are and explanations for it. And so here was provided, which will be also in the description. The links will be in the description. A deadline extended again, filed by the Court of Appeals summary on 5/5/20. Someone said they just spoke to the clerk. His explanation didn't make a whole lot of sense, but here's the conclusion. When the second order came out, it stated that all briefs with a due date on or before May 22nd would be extended. Because the order for extension would make the due date fall earlier than May 22nd, they pushed it twice to make it fall after May 22nd. He says they did this with several cases to give them extra time. The correct due date is May 29. Previous update was Wisconsin Supreme Court has extended deadlines again for all appellate briefs due on or before March 22nd. This means state's response could be delayed an additional 21 days beyond the prior extension of April 17. This would mean a deadline of May 8th. This date is based on what the court order actually says, although the COA website shows due date of May 29. The presumed deadline is still the 8th. If it's confirmed to be changed to the 29th, it will be updated here. So I read that whole thing, but the current update says the correct due date is May 29th. So there you have that. This also was followed by the document that was filed April 2nd, 2020. So it says, in the matter of the appellate court operations during the COVID-19 pandemic update. The link will be in the description. You can read that document for yourself. It's pretty extensive. It's not too many pages, but it gives a really good, thorough explanation.
I think what it says to me, Sammy, is that we're going to set the date to whatever we want, and there you go.
Yeah, kind of.
Don't ask any questions. Don't ask any questions.
The rules change over there all the time, every day. So
yeah, it's extremely fluid. That is for sure.
So I want to tell everybody that Foul Play is on Facebook and Twitter. Those links will also be in the description. Our topic for the day will be, well, Jack, would you like to mention what this topic is going to be?
Sure. This is a autopsy report that was posted on Reddit a few days ago by Mince Tomatoes. I guess they forwarded it and got it posted. And basically, it's an autopsy of Teresa Halbach. And we can take it from there. And
nice.
Well, it's an autopsy of somebody.
True enough.
Sure. Well, we think it is.
Yes.
When I look at this,
they think it is.
Yeah, well, when I look at this, and it's University of Wisconsin Medical School, and the autopsy number is W05-570-F, and it says Teresa M. Halbach, age 25, female, I want to ask a question, really honestly, if they were given fragments of bone, was this an assumption on their part of the age and the sex?
Well, I mean, this whole thing is wrong, right, for a start, because if you read the reports of the actual forensic anthropologists that actually examined the bones, the cremains, Dr. Bennett and Dr. Leslie Eisenberg, I like to call her Leisenberg, none of them gave a definitive age, right? They sort of gave an age range. Both concluded that it was from a female, but if you have a look at this, they actually name who the cremains belong to, and they give the date, the age, they give the sex, and it's a bit of a worry because if you read the testimonies, it's still a bit of a guessing game. Whereas here they're very definitive in whose cremains they belong to. So to me, that's a bit of a worry. That's a bit of a worry, guys.
Absolutely. Well, if you look at the date remains reportedly found, it says November 8th through the 10th of 2005. The date of and time of examination is November 17, 2005, 4 p.m.
Yes.
Then
Yep.
below it's got a signature that isn't dated until 5/23/06.
Yeah. So there's a big delay, Sammy, when the when Michael Steyer actually signed the document. But you know what? Something even more disturbing is it says here, date remains reportedly found, and it gives a range, November the 8th to the 10th. So it tends to suggest that not all the cremains were found at the same time. It's over sort of like 2 days, and it makes you wonder, well, where exactly were the cremains, right? It's hard to believe that if you allegedly burn someone in the burn pit, you expect to find all the cremains in the one spot, right? But clearly this is not the case. There were cremains in Yunda Burn Barrel number 2, and of course we mustn't forget the cremains which were at the Manitowoc County gravel pit. So it's really bizarre that they're even admitting here that the cremains were found over several days.
Yeah.
Right. So it's not all in the one spot. I've never seen this before in my life. So it's very, very interesting.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. When I read when
Well, they were
in the
also
beginning,
spread.
that's
They were
really
spread over 2 miles.
yeah.
Correct. I mean, this whole thing, if you don't really know the case very well, you would have glossed over that and you thought, oh, well, nothing of it. But it goes to show that the cremains that they examined were not found on the one day. They were found over several days, which means that the skeletal remains were spread, which is completely bizarre. You have to admit, it is completely bizarre. So if you're finding cremains in multiple locations, are they saying that, okay, the bones which they found at the Manitowoc County gravel pit were indeed human and belonged to Teresa? Is that what the report is saying?
That's what it says to me.
Yeah. But the other thing, Sammy, which is I find personally disturbing to a degree, is if you look under identification. I think Jack made the comment as well, a very valid point. ID via DNA analysis, right? So they're saying that the cremains found are indeed from Teresa Horbach.
What it says to me is that they're saying, oh, yes, this was verified through DNA.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
That's exactly what it says to me. They've identified these bones, these cremains, as Teresa through DNA.
Yeah.
I don't know any other way to
Correct.
read it.
Yep.
Correct.
Did you guys see this? The next page where it says identification of fragments are and other analyses.
Yes.
Identification of this exam are from inscription on the container as well as process. So it almost doesn't sound like they.
Yeah,
It was
identification
written
of
on the box,
yeah.
and Weisenberg was here, basically.
Yeah. Identification of the remains examined at the time of this exam are from the inscription on the container as well as a
says her
person present at this exam. Right.
What does that mean? Person? How can
That was what we learned.
Well, it means that somebody picked up a bone and said, "Oh, this is from Teresa Horbach, 25-year-old female." that's what it's trying to say. And also from inscription. So somebody must have written on the container to say that these are the cremains from Teresa Horbach, right? Because my issue is, how can you do an autopsy on cremains? Right, the only way you're going to identify them, if you look at the cremains, yes, you should be able to determine whether they're from a male or a female, only if you have diagnostic bones, right? So diagnostic bones means that it's specific to a male or a female, right? So yes, you should be able to determine whether it's from a male or a female, but it will only give you a rough age estimate. It will never be able to tell you it's from a 25-year-old. It's from a range, depending on bone growth and ethnicity, all sorts of stuff. But the only way you're going to pin it down to a specific person is through DNA analysis, right? So on the one hand, on the front page, they're saying, oh yeah, it's Teresa Horbach, 25-year-old female, and yet in page 2 of the report, it's sort of a bit ambiguous, which of course it is, because I don't have a full DNA profile, only a partial profile.
As Columbo said, it's her because it's written on the container that it's her, so therefore it's her.
Yeah,
Correct.
exactly.
Correct. So each person is having a 50% bet, if
Well,
you know
as
what
far
I
as
mean.
now those bones and being okay, I understand exactly what you're saying about specific bones only being, the anatomy or the
Correct.
a certain bone belonging to a certain sex, but it would be really with the understanding that you have enough of it to determine what it even is.
Yes, you've got to, basically, Sammy, you've got to have a diagnostic bone. So normally bones which are specific to a female, and we know that a female has a certain type of pelvis, pelvic bones, and also I think it's a radial bone on the arm as well, and also the bridge above your eye. The notch is different in a female as it is to a male. And Dr. Bennett looked at the pelvic bone and was able to determine that it was from a female. But certainly to pin it down to a certain individual, that's I think that's a little bit mischievous, right? Because they actually said the cremains are from Teresa Horbach.
Doc, wasn't there another bone, and this may be the same one, but didn't Bennett examine the ilium?
Correct. Yeah, that's part of the pelvic bone. So the pelvis, if you have a look at the pelvis, I don't have my diagrams in front of me, but if you have a look at the pelvis is made up of specific regions and each of those particular regions and anatomical regions have got a specific name. So the pelvis in a human female has got a different curvature to it. Anatomically, it's different to a male. So it's what is known as a diagnostic bone, right? So if you look at these cremains, you'll be able to determine the sex of the individual, either male or female, and based on a bone size, you should be able to give a range of age, right? You can determine whether it's from a fetus, a child, an adolescent, or someone elderly by looking at things like bone damage, bone decomposition. If you're a forensic, if you're a forensic anthropologist, you definitely should be able to determine that.
All right.
You know, next part, and not to jump ahead on you, but I took notice of the witnesses. Now, this may mean nothing to anyone but me, but I see that there's 2 DCI agents here, but I sure don't see one DCI agent that I would expect to see there, nor do I see the lead investigator from CASO. He's not on there either. Again, it may mean nothing, but I would expect the 2 lead investigators to be present.
I don't. That's a very good point, Jack. I don't recognize the names of those agents. Does anyone?
No.
Yeah, I've seen both of them before, but they're certainly not leads. I know that James Holmes, he's scattered throughout here and there, and so is Lisa Wilson. I've seen her name too, but certainly they're you don't hear nearly as much about them.
Yeah. Well, what's interesting, if you read that identification, it says that identification of the remains examined at the time of this exam are from inscription on the container as well as persons present at this exam. Well, the only person that can give a description will have to be Leslie Eisenberg, right? And it's interesting that there's no DNA person there, which will be Colhane,
right?
Because she's the one that did the analysis. It's very interesting that I think they're just taking it on face value that those cremains are from Teresa Horbach, because remember in the trial testimony, Ken Kratz said these are 100% the remains or cremains of Teresa Horbach, because you can't actually prosecute anyone if you don't have a body, right?
Yeah.
Right. So it was imperative that they were able to put a person's name to the cremains. And in this case, they're saying that the cremains are Teresa Horbach.
That really gets me.
Very strangely worded there,
based on very sketchy information.
Yep. It is.
Yeah, it probably explains why it took so long for the medical examiner to sign it. He probably initially was not happy with it, because that's a long delay from the date of examination to the date of signing the document.
I got another little, and again, this may mean nothing, but this is just my mind wandering off to another area of this date, and I don't know if anyone else can think of, and I know what it is, but did anyone else think of what else got returned around this time, around the end of May? Do you remember, Sammy? All those things that got returned from the Wisconsin Crime Lab. There was a huge amount of things that were returned almost around this exact same time as this date this report's signed. I just thought of that. Thought I'd put that there. Maybe nothing, but
yeah, it's. You want to expand upon that, Jack?
I just, you know, for me, I'm not a huge believer in coincidence anyway. But
Yes.
when you tie
Absolutely
it,
not.
when you tie it to events that happen in this case, I'm a firm believer of not believing in it, and the timing of events just stick out to me. Now I watch it really close as I can anyway.
It's almost like a code or a pattern just sticks out. It's just seems to line up. They have a little bit of an
Well,
alignment there.
I mean, one really shouldn't have anything to do with the other, but to me, the date sticks out. It says to me, yeah, there's a connection here somewhere, and we don't have the information to see it, but there it is, at least from a date standpoint. Because there were hundreds of items that were returned from Wisconsin Crime Lab at the end of May 2006.
Right.
Almost like there was a special part of them going, okay, we've got this and need this. Case closed. We're good. This is gonna do us right here.
Right. Yeah.
You know, there's a little bit further down. The reported history is interesting too. You know, again, there's stuff in here that's really incorrect as well. I mean, if you read it, the probable remains of a deceased reportedly missing at the end of October 2005. Well, she really wasn't reported missing until November 3rd, officially.
Yeah.
The remains have subsequently been discovered over a period of days in Calumet County. Well, no, they weren't. They were discovered in Manitowoc County.
Yes.
For additional details of this case, refer to DCI and other investigative authorities' reports.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a real mess. It really is a mess. I've spent a lot of time trying to follow the bones, all the cremains, how they were handled, and it's an absolute nightmare trying to work it out, especially with all the tag numbers.
Yep.
Basically, you've got various tubs containing cremains. Each of those tubs have got tag numbers, and then what they do is they take the tubs and they subdivide the bones into various parts of the human anatomy, like the skull or the shoulders or the legs, and then each one of those bones have got their own separate tag numbers as well. So it's a real nightmare trying to follow where all the bones are up, where they're at. But what Dr. Eisenberg did is try to subdivide the bones into the various skeletal regions of the body, like the dental structures, the cranial structures, toes, arms, legs, to the best of her ability. But the problem is, guys, pardon me, is that all the bones were fragments. They were very small fragments.
That's what I take one of the biggest issues with this, identifying it. I would think that the most that I could hope for is they could decide based on their education whether it's human or not, let alone any other thing.
Yeah, I mean, for a trained forensic anthropologist, they should be easily able to determine whether it's a human bone from an animal bone, because the structure of the bone is very different in a human than it is to an animal. And it's to do with what they basically have to do is cut or dissect the bone and look at its structure underneath a microscope. And they can tell from the outer layer to the inner core of the structure, it's very unique in a human being as compared to an animal. And they were able to conclude that those cremains were indeed human.
I'd feel better about that if they would have made some kind of statement about what is clearly the chicken wing that's in the bone.
Yes.
I have a huge problem where that chicken wing is concerned.
Yes.
And the lack of acknowledgement of it. And it all lined up with the rest of the little bones on that one picture, and it's a chicken bone.
Yes, I think the problem is, and we all know it, BB. The problem is we don't know the origin of those cremains, where they came from, and I have a feeling that the whoever found bones wherever they were, they just picked up anything that looked like a bone, anything, whether it was from an animal, human, or whatever. They just put it all together, or a chicken. They plonked it all together and then tried to analyze it, which,
Bad as it,
you know,
as bad as it sounds, Dr. Silkman, everybody, the bones, especially if you look at just that box of bones that Eisenberg got, it's really
yes.
it's really worse than trying to run down the barrels themselves, the chain of custody, and how that all flowed. And they are an absolute disaster, a disaster. Many people over the past 4.5 years have tried to put together some kind of trail that really draws down the movement of the barrels. And I don't know of anybody that's really been successful.
Yeah, I've essentially given up because it's way too complex trying to sort out where all the. I mean, Dr. Eisenberg has written a couple of very extensive reports where she's basically outlined the contents of various Ziploc bags, and it just gets more complex by the minute because each Ziploc bag has got its own particular tag number. And it is quite complex to follow. I think the best one can do is that you have cremains, and there are representative bones from all over the skeleton, right? But the main issue, guys, is that we don't have a complete skeleton. We've got around about 40%. So there's a huge amount of the skeletal remains which are missing. And no one knows where they are.
I'm going to ask, before we move on, I'm going to ask Dr. Silkman to jump off the diving board here and see if he can answer one question for me, because he's from that background. I'm certainly not. Is there any reason that can you think of any reason that Dr. Eisenberg wouldn't have taken the time to cut those bones and say human, not human?
Yeah, the way I read it, and that's an excellent question there, Jack. My reason is that she was under instructions from Ken Kratz. The biggest sticking issue for me was her failure to recognize the pelvic fragments that were found at the Manitowoc County gravel pit. Right. She refused to do further analysis on them. And she was asked by, I remember, I just dropped to the floor. She was asked by, I think it was Garn, about why she didn't do the analysis. And she said, I quote, it's because if I cut into the bone, I potentially could have destroyed it. And I'm thinking to myself, wait a minute, these are human cremains. They're already fragments. So what if you cut into one of the bones? You know, it's not going to make any difference, right? If you're a forensic anthropologist, and she actually stated, I remember I did a presentation on this, she actually said, hey, look, one of my roles is to identify human versus animal remains, right? That's one of her tasks. All she had to do, now wait for it, all she had to do was slice one of the pelvic bone fragments and put it under a microscope.
Right.
That's all she had to do. And she didn't do it. And the reason why is because if she said in court, the pelvic fragment at the Manitowoc County gravel pit is human and it's from a female, that's going to prove very embarrassing for the state. Because why would Stephen Avery and Brendan Dassey basically cut up Teresa Horbach, burn her in the burn pit, which you can't do. There's no way you can burn a human being to bone fragments in an open burn pit. But the big issue is, why would Stephen only place cremains, some of the cremains, in the Manitowoc County gravel pit? It makes no sense. You know, you would gather all the cremains in the one spot and hide them, right? You can't account. No one can account for why there's allegedly 3 separate locations where there are human cremains. Cut, human, burnt, cut, human remains. So Eisenberg would have been under instruction from Ken Kratz, don't say a thing.
And you know about that, the finding of the bones so scattered out, and when you find something like that, scattered out like that, for 2 miles, how in the hell could you ever possibly know
Correct.
that belongs to all the other bones you're collecting 2 miles away?
Correct.
Yeah.
And what that does, what that brings up, and I think Jack made the point, is that what is the primary burn site, right? And I remember Eisenberg, in the end, had to admit that she couldn't determine what the primary burn site was, just because allegedly the burn pit had the majority of the bones. That's what made her conclude that the burn pit was the primary burn site. However, there's one problem. Eisenberg never stepped foot on the Avery salvage yard. All she got, and Bibi said it correctly, was a box of bones.
Yep.
Somebody told her, oh, by the way, these came from the burn pit, right? So she's reliant on law enforcement telling her the truth.
And this is where a coroner's grid would have came in really handy too.
Oh, there's no doubt. There's no doubt. Don't even get me started on the coroner. But yeah, it's a huge joke. Basically, by preventing the coroner from coming on that salvage site, it means that if you're going to set Stephen up, it's a piece of cake. So you don't have any official grid. You don't have any in situ photographs. It really is a joke of an investigation.
The backhoe.
Yeah.
Correct. Everything that could go wrong in the investigation did. You never do a dig site using heavy equipment. You never do that.
Oh, no way. Do we know how many pieces, based on this here, do we know exactly how many pieces they're discussing or identifying? Because a lot of the times in here, it says fragments are they're too minute or something to that effect. Did they actually take a count?
I don't know whether they did a total count, but what they did, Sammy, was Dr. Eisenberg weighed the bone fragments.
Yep.
And so she was able to determine the total amount of the bone fragments recovered. So that way she was able to work out a percentage of the human skeleton that was identified.
Right.
So it's about under 40% by weight. So that means that a big portion of the skeleton is missing, and no one knows where it is. But in terms of number of fragments, I haven't seen the total number of fragments, but the part of the problem, Sam, is that some of the fragments were like shards.
Yeah.
Tiny fragments.
Yeah.
Correct.
Oh.
Which means, sadly, whoever burnt the body crunched the bones with something
I'm
heavy.
going to tell you this. They're supposedly found outside, out on the ground somewhere. Part of them are in this pit. Part of them are in a barrel. And I'll be really honest with you, I have a burn pit back here that's, even when I clear it out and I start all over every single year, when I go to clean that, you can't tell what's what. You cannot tell what's what. And I am having serious problems and issues with that because of the fact that some of these are fragments.
Yeah. Oh, correct.
Basically shoveled up into buckets.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How could the guy 2 miles away even know? You know?
No.
I get it.
No,
I get what you're
that's right.
saying. And I'm trying. I am trying to let that just leave it alone. Okay.
Yeah. I think the main problem, though, Sammy, is that clearly the skeletal remains, the cremains, were spread over multiple locations, but I have no faith in when they say that the cremains were found in Stephen Avery's burn pit, because if they were, we would have seen in situ photographs, like a grid pattern, and everything would have been photographed. There's nothing that's photographed. That's damning in itself.
That is.
It begs the question: why would Stephen put cremains in his own sister's burn barrel? It makes no sense at all.
No.
Wouldn't the dogs also want to track all those items and track from it to all the places where the bones were found if they were burnt there and carried away?
Yeah, I mean, part of the problem is, guys, we don't know where the primary burn site is, and because we don't have proper documentation, we don't know where the bones actually were found in situ, right? So that's a big problem. All we have is a box of bones, right? They handed them over to Eisenberg and said, these are from Stephen Avery's burn pit. Tell me what they are. Right, so the whole thing is it's pretty underhanded, and it's pretty bad. It's as bad as it can get.
Okay, so on reported history, the remains examined are the probable remains of decedent, reportedly missing at the end of October 2005, which is not so. So I have a question. The next sentence says the remains have subsequently been discovered over a period of days in Calumet County. Is this not a legal document? I mean,
Well,
I guess.
yeah, well, yes. Well, I think.
Okay, so I say let's just toss this one out because these are the wrong bones. Duh. No.
Well, I think I think some bones were stored at Calumet, so maybe that's what they were talking about. Discovered over a period of days at Calumet County, because I believe that Eisenberg mentions that further cremains were found. They obviously must have stored them somewhere in some type of storage facility, and so more cremains were being discovered and put all together. Remember, Eisenberg said we have one person, one victim, because she couldn't find any. She couldn't find any.
I'm your defense
parts.
attorney, and I'm saying, guess what? We have to get rid of this document because it is not valid to this case. That my client, you're trying to say, killed this woman found in Manitowoc, and your legal document here clearly states Calumet County.
Yeah.
Objection.
Yeah. Yes. Like I said, it really depends on where they stored the cremains, because I know that Eisenberg in one of her reports talks about bones being discovered in Calumet County, or like a storage facility. So they were clearly processing evidence and storing it at different spots, because remember, they had to get the debris piles that were present in the Manitowoc County gravel pit and then sort them. That to put them through a sieve. So in other words, they didn't find the skeletal cremains in one hit. It was over a period of several days.
Right. A lot of it, I know, got shipped up to Dane County to where Eisenberg was. I just, looking at this and reading it, it's almost like that whoever wrote this part of it had some information and they just put it together incorrectly.
Yeah. Probably partial information.
Poorly worded.
So yet again, I'm going to remind you I'm a defense lawyer here, right? In the courtroom saying, excuse me, I would like to strike that from the record because this document very clearly belongs on another case. This is not the case against my client. This says these bones are found, discovered over several days in Calumet County.
Well, yeah.
I'm sorry, I have a very big problem with this. It's supposed to be a legal document, and I'm sorry, but I'm going to tell you right now, this is why I do what I do for a living and not this, because I would be like, these details are not accurate, they're not right, it's not legal, scratch.
Well, you actually hit the nail on the head, right? Because Ken Kratz said he doesn't want to spend any time talking about the bones in the Manitowoc County gravel pit.
20 seconds. 20 seconds.
Exactly. So if that's the case, here's the critical question. Are there any bones included in this report from the Manitowoc County gravel pit? Because if they are, then that proves that they are human. Because this report is saying that those skeletal remains are from Teresa Horbach, right?
Exactly what it says.
Ken Kratz in the court said, I don't want to know about the bones in the Manitowoc County gravel pit. They are not evidence. So if they're not evidence, are they actually included in this subset of examinations, right? Because if it says found over several days, then it begs the question. That means that the state gave back bones to the Horbach family in 2011, I believe was the date, from containing bones that were from the Manitowoc County gravel pit, which means that that pelvic bone was indeed human and from Teresa Horbach. That's what the report is. The report is not saying we didn't include bones from the Manitowoc County gravel pit. The report is saying, we have cremains found over several days, and we conclude they're from Teresa Horbach, 25 years old.
Hey, baby. What crematories are in Calumet County? What did you say?
The Pfeiffer one is the one that is associated with Bushman and his wife's family.
Wait, that's probably where they found them. I get it now. Okay.
Well, I was thinking they were in the storage shed and somebody was digging in the back and said, oh, I found them. They're back here. So
yeah.
Here's the buckets. Yeah.
Yeah. So, guys, unfortunately, we have a very shady history of the bones, and so we're not 100% sure. You just have to take it on face value. Mm-hmm. And that's a very poor way to do an investigation. But we all know that. The whole thing is bad.
It is. Extremely.
Yeah. So what they're saying in this report is that they are reliant on the DNA analysis to identify the cremains. In other words, you've got a box of cremains, and the report is saying they definitively come from Teresa Horbach. Whereas if you look at the DNA analysis, it is highly suggestive. It's not definitive because only 7 loci came up out of 15. And so you can't say with 100% certainty, but it's highly suggestive that those cremains come from Teresa Horbach.
And let's keep in mind today, those figures have changed as far as they've raised the bar on that.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yes, they have.
Definitely.
Yeah, they're 20 now, aren't they?
They are 20, correct, 20 loci now. You have to be super definitive. They don't want people sort of like half guessing. So essentially, you need to be unique in the world. You need to be unique. And just to give you an example, the results that were obtained for Teresa Halbach from the DNA, it means that it was a 1 in a billion chance that it wasn't from Teresa Halbach, which potentially means there are 7 people in the world at that time that had exactly that DNA profile. 7. Based on statistics.
But
so
with
the
it being
FBI say
20 today, that would mean
that you're basically unique, unless you've got a genetic identical twin. So if you're saying that someone's cremains belong to a certain person, you need to be absolutely sure.
Yep, I agree.
And of course, the irony is, if they never had that tissue sample, that piece of muscle that was on the bones, and if they couldn't extract any DNA from the bones, then they couldn't put a name to the cremain. It would have almost been the perfect crime, because it means that all the biological evidence was gone. Everything.
Yeah, well, to the best of my knowledge, that never made it into evidence. Not for the case.
Well, here's my problem with that little piece of meat. So you expect me to believe that out of these shards of bones, that there's a little piece of meat on one, but that the bones are too calcified to get anything off of. But this meat still has a little teeny bit of DNA in it.
Yeah, that's pretty bizarre. That, I must admit, that is very bizarre.
It's about as bizarre as the blood flakes in the front of the raft.
Well, the thing is, right, if the body was placed in a crematorium, there'd be no tissue left. But having said that, it's likely the person or the victim was burnt in a burn barrel. So if the person was burnt in a burn barrel and there were other items in the burn barrel, potentially that piece of bone could have been, in quotations, protected. Shielded. Which meant
but then the bone shouldn't have been calcified, and you should have been able to get.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, we've seen photographs of item BZ. That's where they got it from. Item BZ is pretty well charred. According to Culhane, there was a little bit of tissue left on the bone. So, we have to take it from face value. That's where they got it from.
Well, let's see. If Culhane's mouth was moving, then I'd have to go with she's lying.
Well, they got the put it this way, BB, they got the tissue from somewhere. That's all I can say.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the only thing that we can go by. Also, there was mitochondrial DNA analysis as well. Eisenberg, in her report, actually mentions that they did find tissue, pieces of tissue. Where exactly that pieces of tissues were found, I don't know. I honestly don't know.
I think that those came from north of the salvage yard. Don't quote me on that, though. But my memory tells me it was north.
Some of it came from Michael's salvage yard, yeah.
Correct.
So let me get this right. At that point, they had their hands on something that might actually be totally, completely vital to this case. And somehow it just no longer exists.
Well, yes. Like if you got tissue, that's the perfect sample to do the rapid DNA analysis on.
I'm sorry, this is starting to look more like a comic strip to me. I'm listening. Sorry.
It's a tragedy. It's a comedy, but it's a tragedy because the victim, the victim was murdered in a most brutal way. And you would think that you would do everything that you possibly could to ID the victim, but it clearly is not the case.
It's very sad. To me is the fact that this document has any bearing on the case at all. as comedic?
I would say it's very incomplete. Very incomplete.
Yeah.
I think there's only a limited amount of what you can conclude from that report because it's definitely not complete. But the other thing, of course, what they did is that they x-rayed the bones.
So, photography and radiology.
Correct. They actually they took x-rays of some of the bones. So what Eisenberg, I believe, did was she found cranial bone fragments that had evidence of bullet holes, beveling. And what they did is they x-rayed those fragments, and they're able to find what is known as radiopaque images, which suggests lead. So when a bullet transits through bone, it leaves part of its outer coat in the bone because the bullet has to go obviously through the bone. So you've got a lead object depositing part of its skin per se actually within the bone.
Yep.
And so that's a very good evidence that the victim was shot at least twice in the scalp.
I would dare to venture to say, when that happens, then that bullet that's traveling through past that after leaving its skin is probably even more likely to have human tissue, human bone, something human on it.
Yeah, you sure it's no.
Yeah.
Okay, well, that's not what we're discussing here. I know.
Don't start me on item FL, whatever you do.
I
Don't start me on
know.
that. I haven't had breakfast yet.
Okay, so we're talking about radiography performed on these two fragments discloses at least 4 hyperdense, minute objects associated with a larger fragment, and that's what you were just talking about, right?
Correct. So, Sammy, when you have a look at the X-rays, what you see are tiny little dots, and they're very, very dense. So, if you look at someone who's been shot, and you do X-ray of the bone or the area that's been shot, you'll find that the bullet deposits part of its outer skin layer in the actual bone itself. And they're small little fragments of lead. And so they were able to conclude, and correctly, that a bullet had transited through that area.
And they missed another opportunity. Let's face it, this was a prominent family whose daughter was missing,
Yes.
and yet they miss all these opportunities. But shouldn't they have also taken those radiopaque, at least some of those dots, and compared them with the actual lead from the actual bullets that got fired from Steve's gun?
100% correct. That's, Bibi, I take my hat off to you. That is brilliant. Brilliant. That's exactly what they failed to do. And the reason why they failed to do it is, my theory is that if the lead composition was different to item FL, there goes their case.
Which I'm sure they knew it was different.
Yes, correct.
Either they tested it and didn't tell us and buried the test, or they knew that it was the wrong caliber of gun and that it couldn't have came from.
Correct. So what they should have done was done an elemental composition of item FL with the actual lead fragment in the cranial bone fragments. If the elemental composition was identical, then you found the bullet that actually struck bone. But they never did it, which means they never could associate item FL with the cranial bone fragments. However, we now know, due to Dr. Chris Palinek's excellent work, item FL never struck bone, it struck wood. So that elemental composition in the cranial bone fragments doesn't belong to item FL. So they probably knew that, Bibi, you're correct, and they chose not to include it in the report. because Ken Kratz was very, very devious. He actually never said MFL struck Teresa Halbach in the skull, but he implied it. Right?
Perception.
Yeah, perception.
Created the perception.
Correct. Because in court he said, well, we have 2 bullet fragments, we have 2 cranial bone fragments, we've got beveling. Guys, you put 2 and 2 together, right? And so when Dr. Chris Palanek proved that item FL went through wood, he backtracked in his book. And he said, oh, yeah, that's right. Item FL never struck bone. It went through her body and somehow magically bounced off the bulletproof tarp, right, Bibi? The bulletproof tarp, and bounced up and stuck itself into the wall, which is absolute garbage.
I've still been trying to find where to purchase those.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So this whole case, unfortunately, is a bit of a joke.
It is.
So
Well, this here is
correct.
Sorry.
Correct.
So when they report on this, what's going on, and they're saying that their exam is commencing at 4:10 p.m. The first 2 fragments are examined, and we discussed that. Then the next group of bones is examined, consists of 8 portions of probable skull. Okay. And we're talking about that. An additional subsequent set of 12 fragments of bone are radiographed. And then after that, a second group of additional 12 fragments is subsequently radiographed. And then after that, it says the subsequent set of fragments to be radiographed consists of variable sized and shaped charred portions of bone at the time of this exam, numbering 19.
Yeah. Basically, Samuel, what that's saying is that the skull was completely in fragments.
Shattered.
Crunched. Yeah, crunched. Completely crunched. So your skull has got a specific shape and morphology. So that way, Eisenberg was able to determine which of the fragments were from the skull, and there were a lot of them.
It sounds like they have 45 pieces.
Yeah, a large number. But you know what's even more of a worry? Only, I think it was, don't quote me on this, 35% of the skull was recovered. Right? Where's the other part of the skull?
Right.
Wow, that's a lot gone.
Yeah, so a lot is missing. They don't know where it is. So not only was the victim shot at least twice, but the skull was crunched. As in literally broken into tiny fragments. And if you're a forensic anthropologist, you can determine what is skull because the skull has got a particular type of shape. But not only that, if you look on the inside of the skull, it's got little grooves in it. And they're the blood vessels, right? So if you look at
It's got like a pattern inside?
Correct. They're the blood vessels, which are embedded in the bone. So you can actually determine that they are indeed skull fragments. And I think she used super glue to join some of the fragments together to reconstruct part of the skull. But yeah, look, I know I keep on saying it, but whoever the victim was, it was extreme violence. Extreme.
It appears as though it could have been, but at the same time, we honestly don't know whose bones those were, even if it was Teresa or not. Irregardless, we absolutely have zero idea where did they come from, honestly.
Correct.
And they're gone.
Correct. I agree with you. It's like a magic trick. It's an illusion. which is really bad.
And what did Kraft
because
say? It's all about perception.
it is about perception, correct. And you know what? That had a very devastating effect on Stephen Avery. When they discussed the bullet holes in the skull, you could hear the murmur in the courtroom. It was very, very damaging. And of course, now that we look at it, it's nothing to do with item FL at all. Complete bogus.
Right. Well,
So
it all
we don't
appears
even.
that way.
Yeah, correct. We don't even know where the victim was shot. It certainly was not the garage. It certainly didn't appear to be on the Avery salvage yard either. So, because they spoke with, I think, Chuck and Earl, and he said, look, we didn't hear any gunshots, right?
Mm-hmm.
No gunshots. And according to Brendan, they shot Teresa Hallbuck, what, 10 or 11 times?
Unbelievable.
Excuse me? And no one hears a bullet no one hears any shooting event going on.
Mm-hmm.
So, the whole case.
Oh, and supposedly after
not right.
everybody gets home from school, and and the
Correct.
guys are going in the house
Correct.
to get a shower to whatever. Yeah.
Correct.
Earl and Robert Fabian are running around in the golf cart, aren't they?
Yeah.
Yes.
A little bit later that afternoon, yes.
Correct.
Unbelievable.
Correct. Yes, it is. It is.
What they didn't do speaks so more than what they did, because there's absolutely no reason not to have pictures of that bird.
100% correct. Yep, 100% correct.
There's no reason.
The whole thing is bizarre, and the thing is that Kathleen Zellner got her experts, her fire experts, and he categorically said there's no way you can convert a human being to bone fragments in that burn pit. No way, because it's open. The majority of the heat is lost to the atmosphere. To burn a human being, bone fragments, you need to concentrate the heat on the body. And there's two places you can do that, in a crematorium or in a burn barrel, where the heat is reflected back onto the body. And if you're going to burn someone in a burn barrel, you cut them up. Therefore, you've got a greater surface area where the heat acts on the limb or whatever is placed in the burn barrel. That way you can reach very, very high temperatures.
For a smaller portion. Yes.
Correct.
Yes.
Correct.
So has everyone looked over this page too? Is there anything else on here we want to pick at?
I just find it really ironic that out of the skull bones, the pieces that are the most intact are the ones where the hole and the beveling happen to be.
Included, yeah, I agree.
Yes, but don't forget though that skull is one of the hardest bones in the human body, because
but then other areas of it are crunched so small she's trying to glue it together with super glue. But those areas are still relatively well enough kept to tell that they were shot.
Well, and 65% of it is there, but they just have 35% that has
right.
Correct.
Yes.
Correct.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Correct. So
yes, singer girl. That's exactly.
That's a very good point. That's a very good point. The other thing, of course, is that they didn't find one complete bevel. They only found part of the bevel. When the bullet strikes the bone, it forms a hole, but they only found bone fragments with a partial hole. So those bone fragments are missing.
Now on page 3, it says, oh my gosh, an additional group of 8 relatively sizable charred fragments of bone are radiographed.
Yes.
Above that, of course, it says subsequent set of fragmented remains which are too numerous to count because of the minute dimension of some, disclose associated radiopaque areas. Then the next sentence is an additional group of 8 relatively sizable charred fragments of bone are radiographed. None of these bear any definitive radiopaque areas. Subsequent to this exam, at this date and time, the fragments with radiopaque areas are isolated from those without. They will be subsequently analyzed and processed by Dr. Eisenberg and or other forensic specialists involved in the case.
Mm-hmm. Yep. It just means that only a subset of those bone fragments had the lead fragments in them, as you would expect. So that there's nothing. They basically had to photograph. They had to basically X-ray all the fragments to determine which ones contained radiopaque areas. That's it. Nothing to. So the problem, Sammy, is that they had skull fragments, right? But they were small. That's the problem. They were small.
Yeah. Troublesome.
Yeah, it is. It is very troublesome. It is very troublesome. I just can't get.
Troublesome.
Yeah. I just can't get over the trauma that the skeleton experienced. And even Eisenberg said in her report that there was human processing after the cremains. So in other words, the skeletal remains were crunched.
So now you think about this, okay? From this individual being a healthy, walking individual as of supposedly the 31st. At some point in time, first of all, they were murdered or made unconscious, then murdered, then dismembered, then burned, and then after that, they were dismembered some more or processed some more.
Crunched. Yeah, skeletal remains crunched.
And spread over 2 miles. Think about this, people.
Correct. It's mind-blowing. In fact, it reminds me of another case. The Christine Rudy case.
Mm-hmm. Well,
Same
you
thing
think about
happened
this.
to her.
The person they're saying did this spent a lot of his time on the phone with his girlfriend who was in jail, which those calls are recorded, during this period of time that they're accusing him of having done this.
Correct.
People have stated that she left and they saw her leave.
Correct. Yep, correct. And what's even more disturbing, Sammy, is that Ken Kratz gave the impression that while he was talking to Jody, he was raping and assaulting Teresa Halbach in.
Yep.
And let me remind you of something. Can you even imagine? I had a family member that had a Saint Bernard that passed away, and they had to call 2 or 3 of us to come help them to get this dog into the back of their vehicle down to the doctor. So this little 5-foot-something man is handling dead weight. This does not make sense.
No.
Imagine the struggle.
No.
He was never in there.
Yeah.
He was never in there.
Right.
There's just
the whole thing is crazy.
Yes.
Guys, I just have to excuse myself for a couple of minutes, and I'll be straight back. Is that cool?
Cool.
Beautiful.
I'm going to go on to my next question here for everybody. What do you want to say about this document that Dr. Silkman has just summarized for us?
You know, Sammy, there's one thing when Jack said that he didn't believe in coincidence and that date of 5306, that really jumped out at me because there was a lot of turmoil going on in the case at this time. Jody was having problems at the Averys, and she was actually kicked out on the end of May, like the 21st. she is arrested by the 25th. We have a phone call that says that she was arrested between the 21st and 25th sometime. And Stephen is actually getting to the point where he's not going to speak to his family anymore. He's saying goodbye to Chuck. He's saying goodbye to all these people. So there's something going on in the case at the end of May. There's turmoil going on with Stephen, and I agree with Jax. There's not a coincidence that was signed in May. Something going on there.
Thank you for
That they
reminding
had
us of that, because we listened to them calls some time ago, and that is an accurate account of some of the things that were taking place during that time. BB or Jack,
Let BB go. I'm looking for something.
Okay, go for it, man.
Man, I don't even know where to begin. It's pretty much laughable. I mean, come on. It's just everything's a lie, inaccurate, perception, illusion, coincidence.
Perception. I think it's all about the perception here, and I don't really. I look at this. It's supposed to be a legal document, and I understand that they have a pretty good allowance for what they're able to put in these documents, but I just find that some of this is it's just not proper. Some of it is truly, to me,
Well,
not
it's
proper.
like slapped together.
Mm-hmm.
It's like slapped together, like saying in Calumet County.
That really bugs me.
Yeah. They just slap it together, put a bow on it, whatever they had to do, make it look pretty enough to hold up in court, and away they go.
So now, Maz, do you have anything you want to say about this?
Well, what's always bothered me with the bones is if Stephen Avery did commit this crime, it would have been so easy for him to just keep stopping on the way up to, when he went up to Cruvitz, to just keep dumping the bones on the way up there. And that way they would have never ever been found.
That is
So
true.
why would he do them on his own yard?
Yeah.
You just wouldn't, would you?
Hell no.
That's a very, very good point. If you look at it, he wanted the cremains to be discovered. He made no attempt to hide them. Right? I mean, if you, for a start, you don't burn a body right outside your back door. Right?
No.
You just don't do that. And if you're going to spread cremains, you pick them all up. Right? If you convert someone to bones, you rake them up, put them in a bucket, and you bury them somewhere in the woods. No one's going to find them. But if you believe what the state says happened, he decided to pick up, now wait for it, some of the larger bones, and then decide to walk down to his sister's burn barrel and put them in there. And then he grabbed a bunch of cremains and decided to go to the Manitowoc County gravel pit and put them there.
Yeah.
Right? It's completely insane. And so I think the deception comes from the fact that Eisenberg was unwilling to determine the species origin of the pelvic bone. That says a lot.
I'm really curious.
So
I think I'm gonna have to go back and relook at certain documents, because you look at these things that's being said, you look at the case, you look at the evidence, look at the papers involved in the charges.
Yes.
Because here in this whole thing, the whole narrative they're giving speaks more to this heinous murder took place. And the only way that I could see this actually, as far as the perpetrator, would most certainly have to be someone who is either a serial killer who would do this to anybody for any reason or no reason, or someone very close to this person that absolutely, and please forgive me, but I'm going to say this, got some
What are
kind
you going to
of
say, Sammy?
pleasure,
What are you
got
going to
some kind of pleasure and satisfaction out of it because they were that angry, because they were too close. I just feel like this is the only kind of person that would fit committing a crime
A
like
murder
that.
by passion.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I think what we're forgetting here is the ultra violent that had taken place. This is just not a let's shoot somebody in the head and we'll dump them somewhere.
No.
Whoever did this wanted to remove all identity of the victim.
Right.
All identity of the victim. So whatever had happened to the victim, they wanted all traces removed.
Yes. Exactly.
So whether that person was tortured, raped, or assaulted, or whatever, by burning the body, you're removing all traces of the history of the violence that happened to that poor individual.
Let me ask you this. So, in convicting him, what motive did they use?
You mean against Stephen?
Yeah.
Well, they kept on saying that he had a propensity of violence against women. So that's what Ken Kratz went for. And also the cat burning incidents. Yeah. So he was trying to say, well, Stephen, in a drunken state with his buddies, burnt a cat alive, and let's transpose that to he decided he was going to chop up, cut up, and cremate Teresa Horbuck. So he put two and two together. That's what he was trying to allude to. Yeah, but it's so tenuous. It's an absolute farce. Now, Stephen Avery doesn't strike me. Look, he's never going to be Father of the Year, no. Right? He's not exactly a model citizen. But to commit a murder, and to the extent like this, I don't see him nor Brendan capable of doing anything like this. It's completely out of character.
Right. Well, as everyone listening knows, our topic today was to discuss this document that was found that somebody had FOIA'd. And for documentation, resources to documentation, photos, case files, go to foulplay.site. This is free to you. I really, really want to thank you so very much for sitting down and taking some time out of your day to discuss this with us, because it's very, sometimes when documents come out, people overlook them. And I really, really appreciate Jack for bringing this to my attention. And I do believe it came off of Reddit. So the link is going to be in the description. And I just can't thank you all enough for being here with us today. But I want to say that on each of our podcasts that I would like to mention previous week's PowderPuff viewer comments. And the only thing that I can say this week is thank you all so very much. PowderPuff Team wants to thank you for joining us, because together everyone achieves more. But we got so many compliments that I just had to say thank you. thank you all. Just continue to leave comments. It's nothing could be more important to us than hearing from you. So let us know what's on your mind. Leave us a comment, please. I had to say that. I had to get that off my chest. Now,
Well, and before I forget, also later today, check out Linda K. Listing and One Strand on Trash Talking Tuesday.
oh yeah.
Oh,
Absolutely.
Now I want to share, and the link to this will be in the description. But I'm going to share something with everyone really quickly, and just sit back and listen.
I've been married a long time. I've been married so long that my oldest daughter's my age. I didn't mean to be married this long. No, I just stuck around the last 10 years pretty much to piss him off. Who thought till death do us part was going to take this long?
So that's an example of what you're going to hear when you go to this link. She's got a whole bunch more on there. This lady's kind of funny. I think everybody could use a good laugh right about now.
Absolutely right.
And that was provided to me by BB. I want to thank you, BB. That was a good laugh.
No problem.
I listened to that
Awesome.
lady. She has some pretty...
I found her hysterical, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Been married so long, my oldest daughter's my age.
She also said that the reason why her and her husband stayed together was because of the children, because neither one of them wanted custody of them.
Yeah.
This is amazing. I love it. I love it. So, and I would like to tell everyone, don't count the days. Make the days count.
Absolutely.
yeah.